Last week, we described the crisis and the components of a crisis, and we talked about how important it is to understand those elements to be able to navigate through the crisis time. This week, we will focus on the first element, which is the instinctive feelings and reactions we experience during crisis time. When I asked you 2 weeks ago about one word to describe our situation, some of you mentioned things like boring, tense, anxious. All of these are feelings. So, what are the types of feelings we encounter during crisis time? There are four major types that I'm going to introduce you to today in practical terms because I'm going to tell you a little secret. I actually experienced all of the four. At some point in time, I experienced each one of them since March, since this whole thing started. So if we go back to the early phases when we started to hear about COVID-19 worldwide, what did we feel back then? About myself, I was telling myself that's just a flu. I shouldn't be concerned, I'm healthy, I'm young, I'm not at risk. So that was the denial, which is the first type of feeling. Refusing to acknowledge the actual risk or harm attributed to the crisis or related to the crisis. And this is usually normal when we are not as much informed or when we are misinformed. However, if this actually lasts for long, it can be a huge risk. We realized later on how healthy people were actually the main transmitters of the infection. Now, as the first case of COVID-19 got reported in New Brunswick, we went into lockdown and we started to get inundated with the information, especially in social media. What did we start to feel? We started to feel uncertain, that we had no clue or confused. There were so many questions, limited answers. It was an evolving situation. It still is. There were a lot of lack of clarity about transmission and causes, mixed messages about, let's say, the masks, for example. So when we have no clue or we get confused, what do we normally feel? We feel scared and anxious. So fear and anxiety is the third type of feeling that we experience during crisis. Now, a certain level of fear is actually healthy because it can motivate us to take action or to make certain choices. But if the level of fear and anxiety becomes too much, if it becomes like a panic, it can be very overwhelming. I was so obsessed about cleaning and disinfection, for example. Other people got so obsessed about shopping for supplies and food. So at some point in time, when fear and anxiety become too heavy on us, what do we start to feel? We get to the fourth type of feeling, which is frustration, feeling that there's no way out. We either become hopeless, that nobody can do anything to help us, or helpless, that we cannot do anything to help ourselves. And if we leave actually frustration to take hold of our feelings, it can become really heavy and it can be a barrier to taking actual measures and actions to help us or to protect us and those around us as well. To wrap up, so there are four types of feelings. There's the denial, there's the uncertainty or confusion, fear and anxiety, and frustration. All of these are very normal and very natural during crisis time. Now, how long they last, how strong they are, or how frequently they show up during the crisis time is highly dependent on our personalities, our nature, as well as the context around us, what's going on around us. Whether we lost a job or an income, whether we have children, whether we have family that we cannot see, all of these factors can have an influence on our tolerance to the stress. So, based on what I said, I have a question for you now. Which one of the four types of feelings was the strongest that you've experienced during COVID-19 crisis? And did I maybe miss to mention any emotion or feeling that you might have experienced? We'll wait for your comments and replies and See you next week. Thank you.